As industry leaders and environmentalists continue to digest the Rudd government's changes to its emission trading scheme, the question remains how to engage the average household in reducing its own carbon footprint. The Prime Minister has announced a new trust fund where tax-deductible donations can be made by those wanting to offset their carbon emissions, while next financial year a new scheme will subsidise the cost of installing solar panels. But many environmentalists believe the key to the future of solar energy is not in subsidising the rooftop installations, but by boosting the price paid for the electricity they generate. Mike Sexton reports.
Brad Page is extending his house on Adelaide's Lefevre Peninsula using green principles. The timber is recycled, and when the roof is finished, solar panels will be installed.
Solar panels are much like water tanks for electricity. They sit on our roof and they capture sunlight which would otherwise be wasted. And that's like water that might run off to the street and run down the gutter.
In order to get a better deal, Brad Page sounded out his neighbours to see how many would also be interested in having solar panels installed.
Some people were interested in this purely for the environmental benefits, and for them, the economics didn't really come into it. That was just a bonus. Other people were real bean counters, and they did the numbers on this.
Eventually, 174 households signed up, and as well as a group discount, many also qualified for the federal government's rebate of up to $8,000. But that rebate will expire at the end of the financial year to be replaced with a new solar credit scheme, the seventh rebate system introduced by federal governments in the past decade.
The industry can't plan for the future because every year the future changes, and what we need to be driving is sort of mature and responsible policy that recognises that PV is going to be playing an important part in the energy mix in Australia's future, and we've got to drive towards that.
And they're basically ploys to assuage certain green interests who think that this is a great idea, and in doing so they're forcing higher costs and hoping the rest of us don't notice.
Individuals will be able to calculate their energy use and establish the savings they could achieve with a more energy efficient home.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced another scheme where households can offset their carbon emissions by contributing to a trust fund that will fund green initiatives.
Because the pledge fund will pool pledges, even small amounts can contribute to making a big difference overall.
Germany is a country with half the sunlight of Australia, yet they installed around 1,000 times more solar systems than what we did here in Australia back in 2007.
Adrian Ferrato runs the largest installer of domestic solar panels in the country and says his business tells him the best incentive for people going green is not tax deductions or rebates, but what's called a feed-in tariff, a European system where electricity generated by solar panels is bought back from households at a premium price. His business took off when South Australia became the first state to introduce one, paying twice the market rate for electricity generated by solar panels.
That did increase our business straight away. Overnight, we found that the phones were ringing as soon as that scheme was introduced. That was then followed by Queensland, and we found a similar thing in Queensland. As soon as their 44 cent a kilowatt hour feed-in tariff was introduced, business started booming in Queensland.
Far from the suburban sprawl, Andrew Kerr is taking advantage of the South Australian laws by harvesting sunlight on his property at Lirrup on the Murray River. The part-time teacher borrowed $300,000 to set up this system and expects to pay it off in a decade.
At the end of 12 months, the figures that come back on your power bill are sent to the government, and the government will send us a cheque for that amount, which will be fantastic.
Feed-in tariff schemes differ wildly across the country. The most generous is in the ACT, where every watt of solar power generated is paid for. In South Australia and Queensland, a net system pays only for the surplus power returned to the grid. Victoria, New South Wales and Western Australia are all planning different schemes.
It needs to be, there's a national consistency in the approach to this. So there should be ultimately one good policy that drives the deployment of this technology, and that should be evident in all the states, and we're a long way away from that.
Among those opposed to any rebates or feed-in tariffs is Alan Moran from the Institute of Public Affairs, who believes such systems are unfair because ultimately those without solar panels are subsidising those with them.
They should stand and fall on their own merits, as others do, This isn't new technology about to take off. This is technology which has been around a long time. It won't get very much cheaper. It is very, very wasteful. If people want to do it and accept the high cost of doing so, by all means let them do it. But let's not foist their decisions on the rest of us.
A gross tariff is the way to go. It's the logical way to go, that you should recognise the true benefits of this clean energy and pay for it regardless of whether you use it or someone else uses it.
The federal government says it has no plans to introduce a national feed-in tariff, which disappoints Brad Page, who's adamant it's what's needed if others around the country are to follow the example of his neighbours.
Certainly a gross feed-in tariff would make solar panels more viable for a broader section of the community. And it would make it a more simple system to explain to people how they operate and what the economic benefits of it are.